Okay, K8byp to expose the BS myth from ham radio hobby about reflecting off layers of the boundaries in the atmosphere. This CB radio level myth comes from the 1948 ARRL handbook, the Standard Manual of Amateur Radio Hobby Communication, not experts in physics. Chapter 4, High Frequency Communication, Characteristics of Radio Waves, and here's the myth of atmospheric reflection. Now realize that classically, electromagnetics, to be able to get some visual reference, have been likened to optics. Optics reflect light off solid surfaces. Water is a liquid, but water is essentially a solid. It's a flexible solid. Has a lot of mass, a lot of atoms close together. We've all seen light reflection off water. Radio waves may be reflected immediately. The fifth word in the paragraph is wrong. Radio waves are refracted, not reflected, in atmospheric propagation. And the authoritative reference is John Saybold, PhD. And the H doesn't mean hobbyist. It means doctor of science who specializes in atmospheric propagation, in the book Introduction to RF Propagation, and I've exampled that book here in some of my videos. Radio waves are refracted, not reflected. Radio waves may be reflected from any sharply defined discontinuity. That is true. Notice the word sharp. Of suitable characteristics and dimensions encountered in the medium in which they are traveling. Now notice there's two things here, some sharp discontinuity and traveling through a medium. In the first sentence, they're starting to mix up and confuse terminology. Any conductors are solid material, atoms densely packed, or any insulator, similar property. Insulators are solid for the most part. We improperly say that air and vacuum are insulators, but see, air and vacuum have essentially no matter in them. So they're not truly insulators. Having a dielectric constant differing from that of the medium. Air has essentially no dielectric constant. Therefore, air cannot have a significantly different dielectric constant, except as compared to a solid dielectric like Teflon, or water, which is an extremely high dielectric. Immediately, this first paragraph is just loaded with contradictions, because at 30 miles up in these mythical layers with mythical surfaces that they're in the process of creating out of thin air, air up there has no different dielectric properties from other air up there, because up there is no air. We were in Colorado, up in the Rockies, at the government welcome center at the 12,600 feet. There was a lot less air even at 12,000 feet because it was difficult for us flatlanders to breathe. Go up to where these DEF layers are, we would be dead in a few minutes because there's no air up there. There's nothing up there except rarefied atoms, molecules, diatomic oxygen, ozone, cosmic particles, little bits of dust, little bits of water vapor. There is nothing up there that can in any way be construed to be a surface. And there are no sharp transitions between layers. There are gradual, fairly vague differences in refractive index. But since it's an extremely rarefied material up there, there can be nothing sharp up there. So they've already committed several gross contradictions here from atmospheric physics. Offers such discontinuity if its dimensions are at least comparable to the wavelength. That part is true. The surface of the Earth, go outside and jump out of a tree onto the surface of the Earth. Is it solid? Your broken arm will verify that it's solid. And here starts the ham radio lie and the boundaries between ionospheric layers. There are no meaningful material, sharply defined boundaries between any layers up there. There are gradual changes in refractive index, and there we're bringing back these ideas of light. So now they go on to talk about refraction, but they've already committed so many gross violations of the laws of physics that this book is worthless. And this is where the uneducated ham radio and the CB radio myth comes from of RF waves going up and bouncing off these layers up there from a far more reputable source that isn't full of bullcrap. My commercial radio operator's manual, done by scientists and engineers, not uneducated hobbyists. We set the mock-up of my new tube amplifier on it. There's a base enclosure. We see how it really is. We see ground wave, we see skip zone. Nobody talks skip. That's CB radio myth. We talk beyond skip. Skip means who we can't talk to. Transmitter, distant multiple receivers. Note when we talk DX to Europe, we can talk to many countries at once. So whatever's happening is spreading out over thousands of square miles. Ionized layer, no surfaces, a layer. And Seybold says that much low angle, very strong propagation is because of a layer way down here from the Earth's surface to about 3 kilometers up, which causes low angle ducting and extending the radio horizon. And the radio horizon is a line between a transmitter going over where it contacts the surface of the Earth. It's a very low, shallow line. And the PhD in atmospherics says that it takes atmospheric disturbances like storms to couple up into these layers of refractive index and then travel along the curvature of the Earth. And then other weather disturbances, such as a nearby thunderstorm, cause another rift, another change in the characteristics, and the signals come down. But notice the diagram. The waves that are coming from the transmitter being propagated through the layer are not bouncing off anything. See? This path is going through the layer and then refracting back out to R. This longer, more shallow path is going through the layer, not bouncing off any mythical surface and coming down at R sub 3. Correction. R sub 3. Higher frequency wave. Here's where the myth of reflection from this mythical surface comes from. This higher frequency wave is doing the same thing as these two, but the reason they're showing it at the top of this, which could be falsely construed as reflecting off a surface, disagrees with these two because these two are not reflecting from any surface. So this one isn't either. The reason they're showing it there is to invoke this critical angle, which I've mentioned in my videos before. The higher frequency wave can only go up so high in this diagram before it, in my term, punches through and just keeps on going into outer space. So this exposes this myth of reflecting off this non-existent layer up there. So this is pure ham radio hobby myth, and it violates the laws of physics, like about 90% of the other myth and bullcrap that hams have been taught by these bullshit artists called ARRL. And notice the common theme with ARRL is to only poorly educate people sufficiently to learn a few buzzwords and terms to go buy stuff. This book has become so worthless that it's mostly ads. Look at that. Back here's the catalog section. This book is fantastic for a doorstop. And in the, let's see, the 19, is it this one? I think it's this one, where the bullshit myth is propagated from Johnson Radio about the tuner and the ham shack. That's where that lie came from. Johnson. And I have proven to you that that's a lie. But it's really cool to look through these old magazines, because back then people didn't go buy an ICOM radio off the shelf. You bought these parts and you learned something and did something useful, or maybe you got some decommissioned commercial or military equipment and modified it, and you actually learned something. Here's the vacuum tube for the post-war performance. So, and I've got some of those resistors. So this stuff that ARRL's been publishing since the 40s is a bunch of crap. So use this handbook for a doorstop, or to maybe identify a concept. But get on Google, get a book like this radio telephone book, get Terman's Radio Engineer's Handbook, get some real credible sources instead of Grimm's fairy tales here, because these people are simply lying through their teeth. So there's how we dismiss this idea of atmospheric skip. So K8byp dip.